Steve Gunnels was elected in 2022 and sworn in as DA in January of this year. Steve grew up in Deschutes County. He graduated from Oregon State University and Georgetown University Law School. After graduating from law school, Steve returned to Deschutes County, where he has served this community as a prosecutor for the past 29 years, 20 of those as his chief deputy district attorney. He's been the prosecutor in our family drug court and adult treatment court program for over 20 years. He is proud to have prosecuted some of the most serious crimes in Deschutes County over the course of his career. Steve was honored to be a recipient of the Champion of Victims' Rights Awards in 2021. As DA, Steve leads a team of approximately 25 lawyers and 50 professional staff, including investigators, legal assistants, and victim advocates. Steve continues to participate in many community outreach activities and serves as a frequent lecturer for law enforcement, county college, and high schools. He is committed to enhancing public safety and building trust with the people of Deschutes County. Please welcome Steve Gunnels.
Thank you for that. So, as mentioned, I'm Steve Gunnels. I'm the district attorney for Deschutes County. Left out of that bio from the Oregon District Attorneys Association, it said I grew up in Deschutes County. I'm a Redmond High School graduate, proud Panther. And I always want to mention that. So I'm still proud. And that school is a lot nicer than when I went there. They've remodeled it, and it's actually really nice now. Not so much then. Okay. So what I wanted to talk to you about really is I wanted to address some questions that you may have about the criminal justice system generally, what we're doing in Deschutes County, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. But the topics that are in this PowerPoint include the public defense crisis. I'm sure you've read about, heard about the public defense crisis in Oregon. There's a shortage of public defenders to handle criminal cases in Oregon, which is really an important problem to have addressed by the legislature and by other members in the criminal justice system formally, because the vast majority of people charged with crimes are considered indigent. They require public defense. They don't hire their own attorneys typically. There are people who do hire their own attorneys, but it's a small minority of those people. Also like to talk about the interface between homelessness and the court systems. There's obviously a connection between people who are living without homes, who become involved in criminal activity. It's a common thing that we deal with in the criminal justice system, and there are oftentimes a lot of questions about how people are treated, whether they are charged with crimes, if they're homeless, and things like that. People have concerns in the community. Talk to you about the Deschutes County Courthouse expansion, which is kind of an exciting thing for us. It may not be as exciting for you because you all are taxpayers, and excitement might not be the right word, but it's a really, I think, a necessary step in the evolution of our courthouse to expand, to build more court capacity. We don't currently have enough courtrooms for all of the judges that we have, which is kind of, I would use the word shameful, that's not the right word, but it's unfortunate that we have judges who don't have proper courtrooms because they're fully circuit court judges. And I'll talk to you about a treatment court program that we have. It's the Emerging Adult Program that is an alternative to prosecution program that we run out of the DA's office that has been very effective at redirecting young people out of the criminal justice system and out of committing crimes, more importantly, getting them on the right track and set in a good direction. And then finally, I'd like to talk to you about crime rates in Deschutes County, some trends that we're seeing in Deschutes County, some of them acceptable and some of them completely not acceptable in my view. and we'll go through those statistics because no PowerPoint presentation could be complete without a bar graph. So we have a bunch of them in here. Okay. First of all, with the public defense crisis, really since the beginning of COVID, we've started to experience a shortage of public defenders, people who are drawn to the field of criminal justice. They defend people charged with crimes. They represent indigent people in the criminal justice system. That is, people who cannot afford to hire their own attorney. And that is the vast, vast majority of people in the criminal justice system. So what some jurisdictions have seen is such a shortage in the criminal justice system, access to a public defender, that inmates in the jail and people charged with crimes have been released and charges dismissed because no public defender could be found for them. In Multnomah County and basically in the Willamette Valley, big counties, they've experienced that at shocking rates, hundreds of cases where people charged with crimes, legitimately charged with crimes, can't proceed in the criminal justice system because we, taxpayers, can't provide those people charged with crimes with a public defender. So that is in my view, a public safety issue, and it's also a kind of an embarrassment that we can't provide enough public defenders to represent all the people charged with crimes. The court has an obligation in every case to provide adequate assistance of counsel. That's a constitutional requirement. So the court has to provide a defense attorney, or or if they choose to hire their own attorney, to make sure that they're satisfied with their attorney and that they're going to go forward with the attorney that they've chosen. It is also possible for a person to choose to represent themselves. That is very rarely done. It is not a good decision in general, just FYI. But because the state always has an attorney representing the state. That's me, and that's our office. Oregon Public Defense Services is the state entity that funds public defenders in Oregon and indigent defense attorneys generally. Not every indigent defense attorney is technically a public defender. But we have about 20, maybe a little bit over 20 public defenders in Deschutes County, and we have been kind of riding on the edge of this crisis for the last couple of years. We haven't had any tragic circumstances where we've had to dismiss charges. We've only had one case, thank goodness, where an inmate in the jail was released on the pending criminal case because no defense attorney could be found for this person. That one is a complicated story where several attorneys were appointed and the inmate could not get along with his attorneys. But then it got down to the point where there was nobody available, and a significant length of time went on where there was no attorney representing him, and the court finally said, "You're released from the jail on this charge." It was a domestic violence charge, which is high risk. I'll just speak for myself. The good news on that is that he had another reason to be held in jail, so he wasn't actually released from the jail. He was just released on that charge. So he had a parole violation as well that is holding him currently. What the Oregon legislature recently provided in the last legislative session, approximately $100 million to solve the problem of public defense shortage, and I'm hopeful that trough of money goes a long way towards solving the problem. I have concerns, and I'll explain why I have concerns about whether more money necessarily is going to solve the problem, but I'm hopeful that it will. That $100 million is divided, approximately 70% is to adult criminal prosecution. criminal trial division, I should say. 10 million or 10% to juvenile public defense, and the rest to administrative costs, oversight of the program. So in Deschutes County, we've done very well. Our courts in particular and the public defenders have done really well kind of navigating this shortage. The courts are very careful about getting people appointed quickly, and we've only had that one hiccup in our system that, you know, with any luck won't develop into something much worse, so that we're calling it a crisis in Deschutes County. Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry. So as I mentioned, I think Deschutes County has done remarkably well. The courts, the presiding judge, Wells Ashby, the other judges, the public defenders, indigent defense attorneys have done really well kind of navigating this crisis or potential crisis. There's been a lot of collaboration, that's the word of the day, between courts, public defenders, prosecutors, and the jail, to try to make sure that everybody who comes into the system has an attorney quickly, and that's been a success. During COVID, we had a period of 2 years approximately where there was such concern with overpopulating the jail that with inmates, that a solution had to be found so that people weren't just released, you know, ad hoc. And the process that we came up with between public defenders, the DA's office, the courts, and the jail was that for low-level offenses, those if somebody failed to appear in court, the court would not issue the warrant for their failure to appear. A warrant, typically an arrest warrant, would typically issue or go out into the system. I'm explaining it like you all are very familiar with warrants. I'm certain you're not that familiar with warrants. But if somebody fails to appear in court, the court says, I'm going to issue an arrest warrant for this person. It gets entered into the system. Police, when they contact the person, will see the warrant and will make an arrest, take them to jail. They'll have to go to court and deal with the case that they were supposed to deal with before. That's how it typically goes. During COVID, about 2 years, the low-level warrants for crimes like shoplifting, criminal trespass, disorderly conduct, even some assaults, not domestic violence assaults, but some other kinds of like bar fight assaults, those would go into what's called the warrants queue, which means that the warrants were ordered, but they weren't entered, which means that they're not really a warrant. Nobody can arrest on that. That way it kept down the population of the jail, which was really kind of a brilliant strategy on the part of the court. The court came up with that to keep the numbers down in the jail. The problem with it is that if you've ever seen a documentary of a python eating a large mammal in the jungle, you see this big lump in the middle, and that's how I kept picturing that warrant queue. It kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and everybody knew once we're able to put those warrants back into the system, there are 1,300 cases where those warrants are going to go out, and then it's going to be all heck breaking loose. And it's actually not as bad as I thought it would be. The jail has been really good about taking people in with low-level offenses, getting them processed on their warrants, and releasing them if they had an explanation for how they were going to get to court. And those people have been pretty good about going to court once they've been arrested on the warrant. So we've been fortunate that it didn't break the system once those went back into effect. However, that does add to the load on public defenders. That those 1,300 cases that should have been stretched out over 2 years, and the public defenders would have worked them through the system, 600 a year or so. Those are all falling on the public defenders' offices, so that they have to represent that number, and it's probably pretty close to that 1,300, because most of those people require indigent defense. So that adds to the kind of the danger of this actually resulting in a crisis where people are going to have to be released on really serious charges from the jail. The solution to that could be that we either with that $100 million that we hire more public defenders to take on these cases around the state. Deschutes County, you'd probably do well and stay above the water if somewhere in Deschutes County there were 3 more public defenders working, 3 or 4, in my view. The other alternative is filing fewer cases, and that's not the trend in Deschutes County. We don't file significantly fewer cases than we did before COVID, and as I'll explain, a lot of the cases that we're filing are more serious cases that use up the capacity of the public defenders more than low-level cases. If somebody's assigned to a murder case, that's kind of all-consuming for that public defender for a significant period of time, as opposed to a shoplifting case, which occupies a few hours of their time. So I mean, that's how it, in real life, that's how it goes. The other possible solution is to increase the cap on the number of cases that the public defenders can take, and in my view, that's not viable, because part of the reason that the cap was imposed in the first place is that there's a limit on how many people a public defender can competently represent. The American Bar Association conducted a study on Oregon and found that we were grossly underpopulated in the public defense services in Oregon. We have approximately 600 public defenders in Oregon. The American Bar Association recommended an additional 1,300. That's the guild that I belong to, the American Bar Association. So there may be other reasons for recommending that, but clearly I think we do need additional capacity, more public defenders working in the system, and I say that as I'm either the cat or the dog in that relationship with public defenders. We're always on the other side of cases, and I say that because you need competent defense attorneys on the other side of a criminal case to get the case through the system effectively, win, lose, or draw. So I think the only possible solution is hiring additional public defenders. I personally wouldn't suggest 1,300 additional, but some number that would add capacity to the system. Okay. So the courthouse expansion. You all probably know what the courthouse looks like now. It essentially ends at the corner of that brick building, the cornerstone there, and then there's a little bit of extra addition to the south of that towards Greenwood Avenue on Bond Street, and the gray and black building is the artist's rendering of the addition to the courthouse, which frankly, I put this in there because I thought that is really beautiful. It might not be beautiful. It might not be beautiful to you, but for me, I've worked in the courthouse building for 30 years, and I think that is really sharp and remarkable looking. I think and the extra capacity and space would be fantastic. The total projected cost is about $42 million, so swallow hard there, taxpayers. I do think, and maybe you haven't had this experience. I've had this experience driving into Bend every morning for the past, 10 years, and thinking, I think we may need more capacity in our infrastructure here, because when I was a kid, back in the olden days, when I graduated from high school, Bend had about 10,000 people. Bend doesn't have 10,000 people anymore, but The infrastructure is probably in closer to 10,000 people's worth than 100,000 people's worth. Deschutes County has grown remarkably in the last 20 years. I think we need additional infrastructure. Whether this is the perfect solution to the courthouse, I don't know, but it's a good solution. It's also expensive, and so I think you as taxpayers should be aware of this expenditure. But it's in my view, just knowing how the system works, the criminal justice system especially, we need extra space, and this particular expansion would add room for all of the judges we have plus one. We currently have 9 judges in Deschutes County, circuit court judges. This would create courtroom space for 10 judges, so that every judge we currently have would have a courtroom, a real courtroom, and then we would have an additional space if down the road the governor appoints an additional judge for Deschutes County, which likely won't happen during my career. We just got 2 a couple years ago, and that was a really great day for Deschutes County for our system, because it added a great deal of capacity to get cases through the system. But that was about 15 years in the making, getting those 2, and I don't think we're going to get another one in the short term. Okay, so the completion is supposed to be somewhere around 2024 or 2025, and that's something that I really look forward to, having that capacity. Once that happens, our office will move. We're in the old gray building in the DA's office, if you're familiar with the courthouse, how the layout. There's no reason you would be, but there's an older gray building built in 1949, and then a newer one built in, looks like the 80s, that's the red brick building right next door to it. The red brick building is where the courtrooms are now. The gray building is offices, and mostly the DA's office. We've got the first floor and the third floor and part of the second floor. Once the expansion takes place, all of court staff will move over from our current building over into the new courthouse. So they'll get the new nice digs, and I'm happy. We'll have the entire gray building, and because we're very tight right now, we've got not enough space for all the people we have, but this will make it a better place for us. Okay, I'm going to talk about a specialty program that we have in Deschutes County. Our primary mission in the DA's office is public safety. That's our goal, is to end up with a safer situation than when we got the case, if we get a case referred to us. And there are a number of different ways you can do that. Sometimes the only solution is incapacitation. That is sending somebody to prison for a period of time or for the rest of their life, and I do not apologize for that. I could explain the cases where that has been done, and likely you would agree with me that needed to be done. There are many other cases, though, where you don't want to send somebody to prison because that's not called for based on the crime that they're alleged to have committed. And for some of those cases, it would probably have a negative effect on safety in the community if you sent somebody to prison for a low-level offense. So one of the alternatives to prosecution that we have in the office is the Emerging Adult Program, and it's a restorative pre-charge diversion program, so we don't charge them in court, the young people. It's available to offenders, people who commit a crime between ages 18 and 25. There's a little bit of flex at the top of that scale, none at the bottom, because we don't handle juveniles in that program. But we're a little bit flexible at the top of that, not all the way up to 30, but if somebody just turned 26 or something, maybe we would consider it. And the goal of it is to improve criminal justice outcomes for young offenders. And so the goal, as I said, is public safety in the long run. But the idea is if you can get a young person with their first offense, who committed a relatively low-level offense, into the system early, figure out what's going on with them, figure out what they need, resources, get them directed to job training, get them directed to drug treatment, get them directed to mental health treatment, or whatever it is. Have them address and acknowledge the harm that they've caused if they committed a crime against somebody. Get the victim on board. That's essential with this process for a young offender. If they owe restitution, repayment for any harm that they've caused in terms of money, then they're required to do that. And then we've had really good success with this program. The total 1-year recidivism rate for the program is 4.5%, which is extremely low, which is a really good sign. And the idea is that if you can get somebody outside of the criminal justice system and keep them outside of the criminal justice system, then they don't start thinking like a criminal, even if they've committed a crime. Because if somebody is spending a lot of time in jail, as you might imagine, your neighbors in jail may not be the nicest people. They may think like criminals. In fact, they do. If they go to prison, their neighbors think like criminals because they're criminals. And if you send an 18-year-old to jail for a long period of time, there's a good chance that they're going to come out worse than they would have if they stayed out of jail for that period of time. And if you can redirect them, great, that's a win, right? They're presumably not going to be committing more crimes. And for the victim of the crime, it's a win if they get satisfied that a good result has occurred. We do have facilitators in the emerging adult program. We have 15 community volunteers who are divided into teams, and we do have contact information up there if you're interested in participating. We are currently full, but there's turnover, just like every other agency. We have turnover with volunteers as well. People get other obligations that come up and they can't do it, and so we're always looking for new people to step in. If you're interested in that, we would welcome it. A question came up in advance of this about the interface between homelessness and the criminal justice system or the court system. There are often interactions between homeless people and law enforcement. That means that there will be often interactions between homeless people and our office, the courts, and so on. If a crime is detected, if the homeless person commits a crime, there's a good chance that they're going to get cited into court or arrested, and we will file a criminal case against them. The most common or the most prototypical charge against people who are homeless is criminal trespass, and that is rarely on public property. Sometimes it can be on public property, but more often than not, it's on private property where somebody, bless you, where somebody has been told to stay out of the store. The stores are a really common place where criminal trespasses happen. Somebody who's homeless goes back to the store after being told, you may not come into the store. They will be cited for criminal trespass. We will prosecute them for criminal trespass. Bless you. That's how that's how it goes. Theft, disorderly conduct, those are really the most common of crimes where the person charged with the crime is homeless. But we also see assaults, from low-level assaults all the way up to very serious assaults, stabbings. We've had homicides, sexual abuse, arson. We've kind of seen it all in that connection between the criminal justice system and homelessness. One of the challenges is finding legal representation, as we've mentioned, because virtually, and I don't remember any case where somebody was homeless and hired their own attorney. It wouldn't. That would blow my mind. But everyone I can remember has court-appointed attorney. We file about 500 criminal trespasses a year, so that's kind of gives you a glimpse at the volume of those kinds of cases, and virtually every criminal trespass is filed against somebody who's homeless. Virtually everyone. So that's that issue. The issue with access to the courts is obviously most people who are homeless don't have working vehicles. They find it hard to get to court. One way that the court has tried to address that issue is by having video availability for appearances in court, and they've done a really good job of, during COVID. I mean, there were positives to COVID in a way, and it's not not worth the cost, but it was there were some positives that came out of it, with people trying to figure out ways around what we had always done, because it wasn't practical to have people coming into the courtroom. And I'm not talking about homeless people now, but just anybody, just having masses of people coming into the courtroom. So a lot of the lawyers appeared, and I appeared in court by video. The lawyers did, except for trials and other kinds of hearings like that, where you have to appear in person. And we're still the courts are still allowing people to appear by video. Most people, whether they're homeless or not, have smartphones, and they can appear by video, or they can call in to the court appearance. So that's what's being done now, and it's available to them if they have a hard time getting to court. Some courts have begun diversion programs for homeless. We don't have that in Deschutes County. There are some diversion programs where somebody may be able to get into the program. We have a Veterans Intervention Services program, so if it's a homeless veteran who commits a crime, they may be eligible to participate in the Veterans Intervention Services program. That would be a diversion out of the criminal justice system if they qualify, if they were honorably discharged and are using drugs, have PTSD as a result of service, and things like that. There are certain qualifications for it, but that is also a possibility. We have seen a huge increase in the number of mentally ill in the criminal justice system in the past 5 years. Just since 2020, we had a 100% increase in the number of aid and assist cases in Deschutes County. Aid and assist means that somebody is so mentally ill that they may not be able to assist their attorney in their own representation. That's a high level of mental illness. It's more than guilty except for insanity cases, where somebody was, at the time of the crime, unable to conform their conduct to the requirements of the law. This means that they're not even able to communicate effectively with their attorney because of mental illness, a diagnosed mental illness. Also, we've seen an increase in mental health court, which is a specialty court to get people who have mental illness the help they need, direct them kind of out of the jail system. They still get prosecuted, but the purpose is to get them into mental health treatment, not to send them to jail. And then I mentioned the Veterans Intervention Strategy Program. When we have victims and witnesses who are homeless, which is typically the case with crimes involving homeless defendants, we have oftentimes some challenges getting the homeless witness or victim to court or to grand jury to testify, or to contact them about restitution, about what they need as a victim of crime or as a witness. It's people who live without a home oftentimes don't have the most ordered lives, and it's difficult to put somebody who's living like that into a very ordered system, which is the criminal justice system, which is very ordered. I live by the docket. The docket comes out the day before. That's my life the next day, and I know it, and I've known that for 30 years. That is, extreme order. A judge told me I need to be in that courtroom at that time. That's where I'll be. Not everybody has that experience or that facility, really, to be where they're supposed to be at a given time just because they're told to. It's oftentimes hard to prepare for trial because we like to talk to witnesses before trial to say, hey, what are you going to say? That's kind of how it goes. So that's a challenge. What we do in the DA's office is we have a DA's investigator who is really good at finding people, serving them with subpoenas, telling them, hey, we'd like to meet, giving them transportation. We also provide other rides other than with the investigator if people aren't comfortable doing that, with cabs and Uber to get them to court or to trial. And we provide clothing for court if they need it. We've done that in some cases for trial. And we also have a victim assistance program, advocates who are in contact with people who are homeless, all victims really, so that we can make things easier for them in the criminal justice system, because people don't understand what they're supposed to do. No normal person understands our system. It's for a select few of people who are broken like me. Okay, so crime trends. This is the number of cases filed. So these numbers should be a little bit on the shocking side, I think, for people. We file over 5,000 criminal cases per year in Deschutes County, which is a big number. When I started in the DA's office in the 90s, we were in the high 2000s, and we've gone up to 553.74 was the number of cases filed in 2019, which is the last normal year in criminal justice world. We dipped very dramatically during COVID, down over 1,000 cases, and then we've climbed back up, and we're about where we were in 2019, maybe a little bit higher. And I'll explain why even though the number is lower, we're a little bit higher in terms of crime other than drug possession. Okay. So these are the drug possession charges filed by year, just simple drug possession. So in 2019, we filed 257 unlawful possession of heroin cases, and in 2023, we anticipate filing 6. Okay, that's not because I have a philosophy of not charging people with crime. I do not have that philosophy. I am a prosecutor. In fact, I am a drug court prosecutor, and I believe that the best way to get people who are addicted to drugs, who contact the criminal justice system in this way, the best way to get them into treatment is to get them in the criminal justice system and have a judge order them to go to treatment. I believe that. I've seen it. I will never be convinced that that's a bad way to do it. The interesting thing about possession of heroin is that the heroin has been, people have found a substitute for heroin, and that is fentanyl. I'm not going to say anything good about heroin, but fentanyl is really, really bad. So people who have converted from heroin addiction to fentanyl addiction are playing Russian roulette every time they use it, and we've seen a lot of overdoses in Deschutes County and around the state and around the country, and that's because of fentanyl. Okay. So the statistic that probably makes the most sense to compare from 2019 to present is the possession of methamphetamine. And because methamphetamine is a stimulant, it's not like heroin. Heroin is a narcotic analgesic. So heroin and fentanyl put you to sleep or knock you down, and methamphetamine gets one up. It's a stimulant, strong stimulant. And we went from filing 633 possession of methamphetamine cases in 2019 to filing 62. We expect to file 62 this year based on the numbers that we currently have. And so 90% reduction in possession of methamphetamine charges, which is all, in my view, or all or most attributable to Measure 110, which decriminalized the possession of small is probably too strong of a word, relatively low-level possession charges, potential charges, that turned those possession of less than 2 grams of methamphetamine into a Class E violation, which is a new class of violation. And so that is likely the reason for that huge reduction. Methamphetamine is still a popular drug. It's a commonly used drug on the streets, and those opportunities for intervention in that addict's life are, in my view, being missed because of the new drug regime. Okay, so this is more of an overall view of crime. On the left there, you'll see DUI. DUI is something that is a very common crime in Deschutes County. We file over 1,000 DUIs per year in Deschutes County. Shocked, not shocked, surprised a little bit.
Yeah.
Seems high to me, just as somebody who, like I say, I grew up here, that seems like a big walloping number to me. Over 1,000 DUIs a year, that's 3 a day in Deschutes County, and those are just the people who are caught. And I don't know what the number is of people who don't get caught. It's going to be a big number, right? I've always said that the biggest public safety threat to you and your family when you're on the street is somebody who's under the influence of intoxicants. Somebody who's aggressive driving, somebody who's distracted driving, but driving under the influence of intoxicants is really a big threat to you and your family. And that's something that worries me all the time about public safety issues in Deschutes County. We have a lot of people doing it, and we have a lot of people who could be hurt by it. The more the population grows, the more likely that interaction becomes. Yes?
Can you say roughly what percentage of those 1,000 require a public defender?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would put that at, to be conservative, 75% plus. It's probably higher than that, but it's going to be at least 75%. Yes?
Does that include people who get pulled over twice or more?
Yeah, it includes that, people who have second DUIs. Most DUIs that I review, over half of the DUIs I review are first offense DUIs, and then you get repeats. You get second time repeats. Sometimes you get 5-time repeats. Those are rare though. It's usually first time. If not that, it's a second time, third time, and then the numbers become minuscule down in the 4 or 5 plus. We've had 8. We've had somebody with 8 DUIs before, but that's very unusual, because usually by that point they've gone to prison for it, because it becomes a felony after a certain point, and they don't either. They just learn their lesson, or they learn to walk. So theft crime is down. We were at a high of 1,240 before COVID, and we're projected to be just under 800 now. Why that is, I can't explain, but that's the projection. Other crimes are relatively stable. We've got domestic violence cases there, which have always been between 500 and 600 a year in Deschutes County, which is way too high. And sexual abuse, we are always hovering between 60 and 100 sex abuse cases. The number on the sex abuse, it did drop during COVID fairly dramatically, and it seems to be staying down. And what I attribute the drop during COVID to is that there were fewer children in contact with trusted adults in their classrooms, or in public settings where they could confide in an adult to that something was happening. Less in-person contact with an adult outside of the home, because the most common offenders in sex abuse cases are people in the home, and that's just reality. This is a statistic that I think is really shocking. And I'll just say this, and I don't mean to be overly dramatic. I don't view this really as a statistic exactly, because I go out on all of these murder scenes, and these are real people, and it's kind of terrible to reduce it to a number. But what we've seen in Deschutes County over the years, over my career, the last 30 years, is the most common number for murders in Deschutes County is 1 over those years leading up to 2019. Some years we would have 0, which were great years. Some years that were bad years, we would have 2. And so in 2019, the last normal year, we had 1. And then during COVID in 2020, it bounced up to 4, which is a big jump statistically, although I understand the number, the sample size is very small. It stayed at 4 in 2022, and then in 2021. In 2022, it was an awful year. It was, you probably know about many or all of them. We had 8 murders in Deschutes County. There were 2 double murders and a total of 6 murder episodes or events, and 8 human lives lost because of murder in Deschutes County. It was every other weekend from approximately from March until August, and we in law enforcement, I was going out to murder scenes, and we were all, by the middle of the summer, we were looking at each other like, what is going on? What is this? Because really at the time we were thinking, is this something that is going to be the new normal in Deschutes County, where it's, becomes 20 a year or something, previously unfathomable. Fortunately, I guess, it has dropped back down to a lower number. This year, we're not projecting this number because we don't want to project the next murder, but we've had 3 murders in Deschutes County in 2023, and I hope next year we drop back down to 0, and we have a few zeros up on the scoreboard by the time I retire. But it's a disturbing trend that we're even in a year like this that's lower than it was last year. This is a bad number. 3 is a bad number of murders for us. Yes.
And some of those actually remain unsolved.
That is correct. We have 1 this year.
There was 1 last year.
And there was 1 last year. That is correct. Yeah. I just left a meeting before I came here on the one from the murder from this year. That
I think
with
that was pretty disturbing, that
it-
young woman.
it is. So I just met with the Bend Police Department detectives on that, and so we're talking about that case still. We're not, and the sheriff's office is handling the one from last year, and those are both active investigations. So those are the trends that we see in crime in Deschutes County. Some of them are, the overall number is fairly stable, but some of the trends are not awesome, not comforting, and so I just thought you should be aware of those, and I am ready to answer anything. Yes.
I have a question. The mental health and the people who are alcohol addicted, do they get charged with crimes in your system, or do they go to like a triage court, or do they go to some of the mental health, it sounded like, go to triage and they get sent to some kind of treatment? Does the same happen with the alcohol people? Do they go to some kind of treatment program?
Yeah, so for example, a DUI, a driving under the influence of intoxicants charge, those are typically alcohol. At least alcohol is one of the substances.
Yeah.
Almost every time. There's oftentimes something else on board as well. But all of those people, it's a requirement of the law that everybody who is convicted of DUI or goes on DUI diversion, which is the statutory first offense option for driving under the influence of intoxicants, is a diversion where it doesn't end in a conviction. They have to plead guilty. Every one of those people has to be ordered into alcohol treatment, and they have to complete it, or else either they will get their diversion revoked or they will get their probation revoked, depending on whether it's a diversion or a conviction. So they'll end up going to jail on it if they don't complete their treatment as they're required to. And our office has a traffic team, essentially, that they are like, I was gonna compare them to an aggressive dog, but I won't do that. They are very aggressive with DUIs. If somebody, in particular, if somebody doesn't go to treatment or drives again under the influence when they're on probation for DUI, we don't play that game in the DA's office. We get them held and we get them either back on track or we put them in jail. Yes.
I have a question about defense attorneys. Are there enough around to hire? Is money the answer?
Yeah, so that's I'm glad you asked that, because I was gonna say that, I was gonna mention that before. So in 2020, you might have noticed that there was a lot of social disruption in the United States and in the criminal justice system in particular. My theory is that the interest in participating in the criminal justice system for people in law school, new graduates, things like that, really dropped in 2020, whether as a defense attorney or as a prosecutor. I've spoken to public defense firms, and they've had the same experience that we've had, which is that the number of applicants dropped from, at the height of our power, glory, in the DA's office, we would get 40 applicants for an open position, and most recently we've gotten 0, 1, or 2. And public defense firms have had the same experience. I think a lot of people, not irrationally, looked at what was happening in the criminal justice system with the criticisms of it, the problems that were seen in the criminal justice system, and said, I really don't want any part of that. I want to write wills. I want to, everybody's happy to see me, and I can do something nice for somebody, and nobody's gonna yell at me for doing my job. And I think that's what's happening. I think that's why there's a reduced, demand for those jobs. We do still have some people who are willing to do it, and that's the way we incentivize people coming to work, and more money. But I don't know that will be the solution. I think it might take, the pendulum swings a little bit, and I think maybe after a while people will think, hey, I want to do that. I want to be a public defender, or I want to be a prosecutor, and they will start applying again. Or at least that's what I hope. Yes.
As a follow-up to Laurel's question, was there a day in which law firms that were not public defenders were asked to contribute as public defenders to assist in that? And does that still exist, or is it going to?
It does still exist. It is an option, but they would have to do it pro bono, essentially, or on a contract. And the contract for a public defense, so I want to be delicate with this. The pay for a privately retained attorney in a criminal case, hourly pay, is much higher than a public defender contract would be for a single case. So it's hard to lure people, into representing somebody. That we've had people who have done it.
Well, do they have to be lured, or can you just simply assign it by law? And now you have a lawyer who does wills and doesn't know how to do defense, so
right.
How do you do that?
It has to be somebody competent, right? And so the court likely has that authority, but they haven't exercised it because we haven't, at least in Deschutes County, we haven't met that need yet. We haven't had the crisis. It's called a crisis around Oregon because it's a crisis in the Willamette Valley. But it could be a crisis here, and if it becomes that, then the court probably will consider ordering attorneys to take on cases. That's a big thing to ask somebody who doesn't do criminal law, though, because you'd have to get up to speed on what the law is, from zero to ready in a hurry to handle one of those cases, and that lawyers don't like to do that. You want to be over prepared.
So this public defender issue is a nationwide crisis, is it not?
other places are experiencing it, and I think the reason for that is the kind of the stench associated with what I do for a living, with being a lawyer in the criminal justice system. I think a lot of people in law school think that.
Well, there's a lot of money in defense. If you're defending a murder case, the state pays you at a higher rate than
Right.
they do for just
Yeah.
intoxication.
Well, and in private defense also, there's a lot more money.
Yeah.
And it's a lot cleaner.
Well, one of the questions I have is on your sex abuse reports. That number seems incredibly low to me when we know statistically 1 in 4 women are sexually abused. And so that number cannot possibly be an accurate number for Deschutes County. So what proactive things does the court take to encourage reporting?
So the primarily the proactive part is, we have relationships with Saving Grace and with the Kids Center for Child Abuse, and they do public awareness campaigns. The courts don't really do, that's not really their role to do public awareness. Our office participates in public awareness campaigns, law enforcement does as well. Some of the issues with refusal to report or reluctance to report aren't really susceptible to encouragement, if you know what I mean. It's a big thing to ask somebody to go through the system, and as somebody who participates in the system every day, I can tell you it would be a big thing if my family member experienced something like that. I would encourage it, but I would be very self-conscious about doing it, because I know that people can get run through the knothole, so to speak, if they report sex abuse about another adult, about somebody. When a sex abuse victim is on the stand, oftentimes they're treated like they are the bad person in the room, and that's just reality. I'm sure you saw it in your career as well. Like it's a big thing to ask somebody, and you have to be really confident and brave to do it, and it's a hard thing to ask somebody to do. That said, we've had a decline in the number of cases filed, so that the number that I have is accurate in terms of cases filed. It's clearly not accurate in terms of the number of events happening or incidents happening in the community. The difference is not reporting it to law enforcement, or not being able to develop enough evidence to present it to our office in order to charge it. And that's a perennial problem, and it's a big thing to ask somebody to come forward with something like that. Yes.
One thing about a little over 5 years ago, the League of Women Voters of Oregon, and it could have been a particular county, but I don't remember, did a study on different district attorney's offices of each county. And I want to tell you that the district attorney of our county, Deschutes County, was considered one of the absolute best on having diversion programs and keeping people out. And I think you should know that I never saw the end of the thing, but the people who I was there and they were talking to the district attorney at that time basically said, you have one of the best district attorney's offices in the state. My question is, going back to the drug, and now that the law has changed and so the little amounts don't get people into treatment, which seems to be what everybody's complaining about, is there isn't that stick along with the carrot. And that, what do you see happening? I know there's stuff going on in the legislature about this, but what do you see happening on that?
So so that's the problem with, as I see it, with Measure 110, and I'm really not here to campaign for anything or to try to convince you of anything. What I see as a practitioner and somebody who participated in the adult treatment court program for a long time is that people who are in the throes of addiction need something to happen, a significant event, such as going in front of a judge and having a judge say, you need to do this, or else you're going to go to jail, or else we're not going to be able to give your kids back, those things, which are real. You know, kids get taken away when their parents are out of their minds on drugs. That happens every day. And so I always think of the simple drug possession charge as an opportunity to intervene in that person's life to get them on the right track. That's really what it's always been used for in Oregon. It's not about sending somebody to jail for a long time because they got caught with a half a gram of methamphetamine. It's about getting them on probation with a probation officer and getting them ordered into treatment. And they have to follow through. If they don't follow through, there is going to be a consequence. And that's the key to success in the Adult Treatment Court program, and it's the key to success in all real treatment programs, at least court-centered treatment programs, is there's a real consequence for failure to participate or failure to follow through. That's what's necessary. And what Measure 110 does, there are two aspects to Measure 110. The one aspect that is apparently working fine is the funding of treatment. Treatment is being funded adequately or well. The problem is you see that reduction in the number of cases, simple possession cases, going to the point where a judge can order somebody into treatment. You know, a 600 case reduction in the number of possession of methamphetamine cases. That's huge. Those are 600 opportunities to intervene in that person's life and get them ordered into treatment so that they will have to follow through, or else there's going to be a consequence. So what the legislature is considering right now is making possession of small amounts of those drugs a crime again, not an e-violation. The e-violation is not serious. It's a violation that can be imposed, but there's no consequence if you don't pay it. That's nothing. And so the proposal is make it a Class A misdemeanor to possess those small amounts of drugs, not a felony. Give somebody an opportunity to go into diversion at least the first time they get caught with drugs, so that they're in a court-directed diversion program, and then subsequent ones, who knows? There's one proposal that just has infinite diversions, which I don't know if that makes sense. It doesn't make sense to me, but that's the proposal in the legislature right now, to give judges an opportunity to get somebody into treatment. There are ballot measures being proposed that are kind of all over the board to try to correct that aspect of Measure 110. There's one that's a total repeal of Measure 110. I don't know if that's going to get off the ground. There's a lot going on that will be. You're the League of Women Voters. You will know all about it. I'm sure you'll have people coming talking. Yes. Yes, I'm sorry.
Sheriff Shane Nelson has called himself a member of the, and I can't remember what it's called, the Sheriffs Are Above the Law group of counties in Oregon, saying that he will not enforce gun laws that are in effect in Oregon. And he's retiring soon, and there are two other individuals who are running for that position. Do you happen to know whether or not they are in agreement with Shane Nelson on not enforcing gun laws in Oregon?
I don't know. I'm not familiar with that statement, so I don't want to adopt it, but I accept your representation about it, but I wasn't aware of that. What I had understood was that it was let's wait to see if the courts uphold it, but maybe that's not true. So the way that
essentially what he said is that people have a constitutional right to guns, and any laws that Oregon creates he will not enforce.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what all the DAs in the state are doing is waiting to see what happens in the courts. If it's upheld, then we would file based on the law, because that's our oath to follow the law. I don't know about what the candidates' view are. I don't know. Maybe they've put out positions on that.
Well, there was an interesting article in the Bulletin about those two candidates, and they talked about both of them at length, but that particular issue they didn't mention.
Okay. Well, You are the League of Women Voters. I would suggest that you invite.
That sounds
in-
like a cop out at this point.
Sounds like a
No, I'm
smart
kidding.
man.
You don't underestimate your power. Invite them and ask them the question. I honestly don't know. I've spoken to them very briefly about their intending to run, and that's it.
I think you can assume that the DA will follow the law, but the sheriffs may not. That's been my personal experience.
Invite them to Canada.
We will follow the law, and if that I think was a ballot measure, was it 114? It wasn't 114, it was another one. 114 is the
114 is the
Redistricting.
Anyway, so the ballot measure that you're talking about, the way that it is right now, I think it's stayed, the order is stayed, or the law is stayed until there's a decision, maybe at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and there needs to be some final resolution to say whether it's constitutional or not constitutional. It might go all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court for a decision on that, and that's what I believe that's what all of the DA's office in the state are waiting for, is a final decision on whether it's constitutional or not. And so what are the parameters of what is the crime that could be charged and so on.
It changes if we have an incident like Maine.
If what?
If we have an incident like Maine, then they get on the stick.
I think the hand in the back there.
Can you explain the time frame and setting of a typical drug and/or alcohol treatment program? I don't
Yeah.
know whether we're talking about going in after work for a couple hours, or we're talking about an inpatient treatment setting, or what?
Right. So when somebody is ordered to complete treatment, drug treatment or alcohol treatment, the way that it starts is that it starts with an assessment, and it's an assessment of the need of the person, whether to go to inpatient treatment or outpatient treatment. The vast majority are outpatient treatment, and so that's the after work or at lunchtime going to a treatment program for treatment for most people who are in that system. Some people are assessed at a level where they need to go to inpatient treatment, and that's typically a 30-day, could be up to 6 months depending on the program, inpatient treatment program. The most common is a 30-day or a 28-day program, but
How about for the outpatients?
outpatients are typically, in fact, so for inpatient, they would be inpatient for that briefer period of time, and then follow-up treatment would last, it could be up to a year, it could be longer, but typically it would be 6 months of total treatment time. And the philosophy of treatment providers, I happen to know, is you don't want to overtreat, you don't want to undertreat, but you also don't want to overtreat somebody who has substance abuse issues, because you start to see a negative effect from overtreatment as well. Yes.
From the data, it looked like, DUIs, that's the biggest risk to public safety. How does Deschutes County numbers compare to other similar counties? And is there any public campaign in mind to try and address that? I think of all the, even publicly funded promotion of alcohol consumption that I've always been troubled by.
Yeah, the public safety campaigns are always law enforcement and the DA's office, saying we're enforcing it, we're prosecuting it. Bend Police Department, all of the agencies have aggressive and under the influence teams that patrol looking for those crimes. They know where to go to find those crimes. That's frankly part of the big number, is that law enforcement here is very aggressive and very good at detecting driving under the influence of intoxicants offenses. But it's also, we wouldn't have those numbers if there weren't people out doing it, and we miss more than we get, clearly. So those are the public safety campaigns that I know about. They typically, a beer ad will say don't drink and drive at some point, but anyway, maybe a mixed message. Yes.
I'm curious about the treatment, especially in or outpatient treatment. Who pays for that?
Well, Oregon Health Plan will pay for it if the person is indigent. We'll pay for treatment.
For inpatient?
for both.
For both?
Yeah, there's a process. If it's Oregon Health Plan, they have to exhaust outpatient treatment options first before OHP will pick up for inpatient treatment. But that happens sometimes, and sometimes they skip it because if the assessment is off the charts, then they say the outpatient treatment just won't work, and so they go right to inpatient.
And are there enough, vacancies or spaces, for lack of a better word?
Treatment beds are always short. We're always looking for treatment beds. It's not terrible usually. It's usually weeks, not months. But at least in my experience, somebody can find a treatment bed or get into outpatient treatment until a treatment bed opens up to try to ameliorate the problem or limit the damage before they go to inpatient.
As a follow-up to her question, who pays if the impaired person is not indigent? In other words, they have money.
If they have health insurance will pick it up. And if they don't have health insurance and they're not indigent, then they have to pay for it out of pocket. But if the judge orders it, then they have to.
We're around 10 after 1, so
Thank you.